Episode 2. The first failure in fortune-telling. Last time, Nagi and Nami successfully tied the knot on Onogoro Island. A perfect romance, right? Well, not quite. The baby they blessed was weak and couldn't even stand. His name was Hiruko. In Shinto myth, it's written that their first child wasn't fully formed. With heavy hearts, they placed Hiruko into a boat made of reeds and let the ocean waves carry him away. It was a heartbreaking goodbye. Confused and heartbroken, they flew back to the heavens to ask the high gods what went wrong. The gods performed Futomani, a sacred and intense ritual where they burned a deer's shoulder blade to read the cracks.
The divine crack has spoken. The reason for your failure was the woman. Nami, you spoke first during the wedding ritual. That is what broke the sacred law.
Wait, that was the reason? Yes, an ancient rule. The man must speak first. It sounds wild to us today, but for them, it was the ultimate answer. With the mystery solved, Nagi and Nami are finally ready for their grand rematch.
Imagine being like an all-powerful creator god, right? You've just stood on the floating bridge of heaven, you lower this beautiful jeweled spear into the primordial ocean, and you literally pull a brand new island out of the sea.
Right, a totally flawless execution so far.
Exactly. So you descend to this pristine land, and you perform this beautifully choreographed celestial wedding with your divine partner. The cosmic music swells, the universe aligns, and your very first act of bringing new life into this world is, well, it's a complete unformed disaster. Just a shapeless entity without bones.
It is an incredibly jarring image, isn't it? I mean, you have these supreme beings of order and creation, and their very first collaborative effort yields pure, unadulterated chaos.
Yeah, totally.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we are opening up a stack of ancient Japanese texts, specifically looking at the Kojiki, the oldest surviving chronicle in Japan, to explore a narrative that completely upends how we think about mythology, perfection, and, well, failure.
It's just wild.
It really is. And for you listening, this isn't just some dusty ancient history. It's actually a really profound masterclass in how an entire culture processes the concept of a devastating setback. Something, we all deal with today.
Right, because usually when we think of mythology, it's just a list of who smote who or what thunderbolt struck which mountain.
Oh, exactly. The standard epic battles.
Yeah, but the sources we're unpacking today, they read more like the ultimate story of ancient troubleshooting. I mean, we are looking at a divine marriage that immediately falls apart, an intense, fiery fortune-telling ritual that makes modern astrology look like absolute child's play, and just a massive plot twist regarding one of Japan's most famous deities.
It's quite the roller coaster.
So let's set the scene. Take us to that floating bridge of heaven. Who are our divine architects here?
Right, so our central figures are two creator gods. We have Nagi, the male deity, who is, very earnest, but maybe a slightly clumsy boy god.
Okay, Nagi, got it.
And beside him is Nami, the female deity. She is bright, super energetic, and highly capable. They are essentially the original divine power couple.
The ultimate VIPs.
Exactly. And they're tasked by the older, formless heavenly gods with this monumental job of solidifying the drifting, chaotic land down below.
And they do this using that jeweled spear I mentioned earlier, right? Because the imagery in the source text is just, it's stunning.
Oh, it really is gorgeous. They stand on the heavenly floating bridge and they plunge this magnificent spear into the brine of the ocean.
Wow.
Yeah, they stir it around, and when they lift the spear back up, the drops of salty water that fall from the tip, they coagulate. And that crystallized salt forms Onogoro Island.
Okay, so they've got the real estate, the foundation is set. What comes next?
Well, to continue creation, they need to be properly united.
Right.
So they descend to Onogoro Island, and they build a massive heavenly pillar, basically an axis mundi connecting heaven and earth along with this grand palace.
Sounds like a pretty solid setup.
It is. And the marriage ritual they devise requires them to walk around this pillar in opposite directions. When they meet on the other side, they are to exchange greetings, consummate the union, and begin populating the world.
Honestly, it seems like a very straightforward blueprint. Like, they follow the steps, they do the lap around the pillar, they meet in the middle. But this is where the cosmic train completely derails, right? What actually goes wrong.
It really does derail. So when they meet on the other side of the pillar, Nami, the woman, speaks first.
Wait, that's it?
That's it. In her enthusiasm, she just exclaims, "Oh, what a fine and handsome young man." And then Nagi replies, "Oh, what a fine and beautiful young woman."
Okay, sounds totally lovely and normal.
Right. They proceed with the union, assuming everything is perfect.
Yeah.
But the child born from this ritual is named Hiruko. He's described in the texts as being entirely incomplete.
Oh, man.
Yeah, they call him the leech child. He's unformed, lacking structure, essentially boneless and squishy. The texts say that even after 3 years, he cannot even stand.
See, looking at the text, my initial thought was, how does a simple greeting cause a biological, or I guess a divine failure? Did they walk the wrong way? Did they mess up some magic chant?
You'd think so, right?
Yeah. To a modern reader, it sounds like some petty administrative rule in heaven. Like, oh, she spoke first. Invalidate the warranty, send them a broken universe.
It totally sounds arbitrary to modern ears, but it is deeply rooted in the underlying cosmology of the time. This wasn't just a breach of etiquette. It was a disruption of the fundamental physics of their universe.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, the ancient belief system held that the male energy is the active initiating force. The female energy is the receptive nurturing force. So when Nami spoke first, she essentially inverted the energetic flow.
So by initiating, she reversed the polarity of the whole ritual. I mean, that is just absurdly strict heavenly management. Like, talk about micromanaging your employees.
Well, it's a very outdated patriarchal rule. The 8th century wasn't exactly known for its progressive gender politics, to be fair.
Fair point.
But purely within the mechanics of the universe they were building. Reversing that sequence resulted in a cosmological short circuit. The offspring couldn't hold a form because the foundational energy was just chaotic.
Right, wait, so the gods literally messed up. It's exactly like hyping up the ultimate tech hardware launch. And on day one, the device is completely full of glitches. How is that even possible for divine beings?
That is the big question. And the reality of it is incredibly tragic. Perfection and purity are absolutely paramount in this divine realm.
So they can't keep them?
No, they can't. A flawed creation cannot remain in the sacred space they are trying to establish. The mythology paints a remarkably heartbreaking picture here.
A source text for this part is just heavy.
It truly is. Nagi and Nami, holding back tears, take this helpless, squishy baby Hiruko, and they place him into a small, frail boat woven out of reeds.
Oh, it's just devastating to visualize.
They carry this reed boat down to the shoreline, and there, at the edge of the world they literally just built, at dusk, they push the boat out into the open water. The sunset is glistening sadly on the water as they cast their firstborn away to the currents of the sea.
You can just picture the absolute silence on that beach. Just the sound of the waves and these two all-powerful beings standing there completely powerless, watching their mistake drift away into the horizon.
It's a very human moment for gods.
It really is. But they can't just sit on the beach forever, right? They still have this mandate to create the islands of Japan. So they have this broken system, but they don't have a manual to tell them why it broke. I mean, they didn't know the whole initiating rule was the culprit at that moment, did they?
Exactly. They were completely baffled. They knew the result was flawed, but they couldn't identify the user error. And since they couldn't just Google it or check a troubleshooting forum, they had to return to the higher heavenly planes.
Time to talk to upper management.
Exactly. They had to physically ask the older primordial deities what went wrong. And the method the heavens used to diagnose this problem brings us to one of the most intense rituals in ancient history, Futomani.
Okay, Futomani. I have been waiting to get to this part of the sources. We are talking about a fortune-telling ritual, but this is not like pulling a tarot card or reading tea leaves in a cozy cafe.
Not even close.
Unpack the mechanics of Futomani for us, because it is wild.
It is incredibly intense. Futomani is a highly specific form of divination. Think of it like a dramatic cutscene in a beautiful, dark video game. They are seeking answers from the divine by reading the cracks on a burned shoulder blade.
And in this case, we are talking about deer bones, correct? I mean, that feels very specific.
Yes, specifically the broad, flat shoulder blade of a male deer. In ancient Japanese animism, deer were deeply revered as sacred animals, messengers of the gods. But the ritual is incredibly complex.
So they don't just toss it in a campfire.
Oh no, the heavenly gods would use the bark of a specific type of cherry tree. They ignite this bark because it burns at an intensely high focus heat.
Wow.
And then they apply this glowing, superheated cherry bark directly to the surface of the deer bone in a blazing, roaring fire.
The sensory details of that must have been overwhelming, like the heat, the smell of burning bone and cherry wood.
And the sound. As the bone absorbs that massive thermal shock, it begins to warp. Eventually, the tension becomes too great, and the bone violently fractures with sharp, explosive cracking sounds.
So they aren't just looking for ash marks, they are looking at the structural failure of the bone itself.
Exactly. They were reading the thermal fractures much like a map. It's an incredibly high-stakes atmosphere.
That is absolutely wild. Imagine going to your boss today and saying, hold on, before we finalize this Q3 business strategy, let me go burn a deer bone in the parking lot and read the cracks.
I mean, human resources might have a word with you.
Yeah, I think I'd be fired immediately.
Yeah.
But how do you even read that? What makes a crack a yes or a no?
It was a highly sophisticated visual language. A clean, vertical crack running up the bone might indicate a direct line of communication with the heavens, a definitive yes.
Okay, makes sense.
But horizontal cracks, jagged lines, or spider webbing fractures would suggest obstacles, disruptions in the natural order, or a hard no.
So they do the ritual, the bone snaps, and what happens next?
Well, picture the majestic, echoing, deep bass voices of the heavenly gods booming down from above to deliver the verdict. They read the chaotic fractures and announce that the fault lies entirely with the woman speaking first.
The booming voice of heaven just yelling, "She spoke first! Do it over!"
That is precisely the energy. The heavens shout the cosmic diagnosis through the medium of a shattered deer bone. And what makes this moment so brilliant in the source material is how Nagi and Nami react to this terrifying heavy metal revelation.
I love this part. They aren't crumbling in fear, are they?
Not at all. Despite this intense aesthetic of the blazing fire and booming celestial voices, their reaction is just to be completely dumbfounded.
Really?
Yeah, just to sort of stand there, blink. They had no idea. They just thought she was being friendly. They just stand there going, wait, that's why?
That is so funny. Just a blank stare like, are you serious? It really grounds them. So, okay, armed with this hard-won, fire-forged knowledge, they descend back to Onogoro Island. They do the reset.
They do. They walk around the heavenly pillar once more. They meet. This time, Nagi makes absolutely certain to speak first. He initiates the greeting. Nami responds. The cosmic polarity is respected.
And it works.
It works. The union is successful. They go on to give birth to the islands of Japan, starting with Awaji, then Shikoku, Kyushu, and so on. They successfully execute their blueprint.
The system reboots perfectly. The islands are formed. But this is the massive question that the sources force us to confront. What about the original failure?
Right, the forgotten glitch.
Yeah. We have this rigid heavenly structure that demands absolute perfection, and when it doesn't get it, it discards the result. Are we really just supposed to forget about the squishy baby, Hiruko, drifting away in the sunset?
That tension between the rigidity of heavenly law and what actually happens down in the earthly realm is the crux of this entire narrative. Because Hiruko's story does not end in the ocean.
Oh man, I love this part.
The way his story evolves completely changes how you view this myth, because he actually survives the journey.
He survives the ocean. That fragile little boat of reeds actually makes it.
It does. It somehow navigates the treacherous currents. He drifts for an indeterminate amount of time, a castaway of the cosmos. But eventually, the boat washes ashore. Tradition holds that he landed at a beach in what is now Nishinomiya in Hyogo Prefecture.
Okay, so he hits land.
Yes. And this is where the paradigm completely shifts. Because when the local humans find this boat on the shore, they do not see a cosmological mistake. They do not see a leech child who broke the rules of yin and yang.
What do they see?
They see a gift from the sea. In ancient Japanese folk religion, there is a concept known as maribito, the idea of sacred, divine guests who come from afar, often across the ocean, bringing gifts of wisdom or spiritual power.
Oh, wow. So anything strange from the ocean is valued.
Exactly. Anything unique that washed up on the beach was treated with reverence. So the locals take this abandoned, unformed child in, they care for him, they nurture him.
That is such a profound divergence. I mean, the heavens demanded perfection and threw him away. Humanity embraced the imperfection and nurtured it.
Beautifully put. And through that human belief, through centuries of folklore and cultural synthesis, this discarded child undergoes an incredible metamorphosis. He overcomes his physical limitations, he grows, he transforms, and he takes on a new identity entirely.
Hold on.
Hiruko becomes Ebisu.
Ebisu. I need to pause here because for anyone who follows Japanese culture, or honestly anyone who has visited a good izakaya, that name is massive.
Oh, absolutely massive.
We are talking about the smiling, joyous god holding a fishing rod and a massive sea bream, right? One of the 7 lucky gods.
The very same.
Yeah.
Ebisu is arguably one of the most beloved deities in Japan. He is specifically the god of fortune, of business prosperity, and of abundant harvests.
Wait, really? You're telling me the literal face of the famous Ebisu beer, the guy holding the fish with the big smile, is the squishy baby from the reed boat?
I am completely serious. It is the same entity.
That is the ultimate glow-up. He got fired from the creation myth on day 1 for being a glitch, and through the patience of human care, he ends up as the CEO of fortune and beer.
It is a phenomenal trajectory, isn't it?
Yeah.
But if we pull back and look at the cultural resonance here, it reveals something so beautiful about how this culture uniquely treats ancient failures.
How so?
Think about Western mythological structures. Look at Greek or Norse mythology. If a god makes a mistake in those stories, it usually results in a monster.
Oh, right, like a divine mistake or a curse, births a minotaur or a Medusa.
Precisely. The mistake becomes a permanent, dangerous stain on the world. A monster that a hero eventually has to violently slay. The failure is a permanent curse.
But the Kojiki offers a completely different alternative.
Yes. Here, the foundational myth does not say that failure is a permanent monster. It says that an initial failure, even one that feels entirely hopeless, even one you are forced to let go of, is not the end of the narrative.
It's just the beginning.
Exactly. The castaway becomes the bringer of luck. The broken, discarded thing literally evolves into the seed for future blessings.
That reframes the entire concept of a mistake. It's like saying the glitch was never actually a bug. It was just a feature that required a completely different operating system to be understood.
That is a wonderful analogy.
I mean, Nagi and Nami couldn't see his potential because their vision was narrowed by the rigid expectations of the heavens. They were too busy burning deer bones in the parking lot to realize that the ocean might have a different plan.
Right. The heavens required instant perfection, but the earthly realm allowed for the slow, messy process of transformation. Ebisu is the ultimate symbol of resilience, the idea that value isn't always apparent at the moment of creation.
Sometimes it requires time, drifting, and the perspective of those who find you washed up on their shore.
Exactly.
Man, let's briefly recap this wild journey we've been on today. We started with the creation of an island from the tip of a jeweled spear, leading to a divine marriage that inadvertently inverted the physics of the universe because of an outdated rule.
A very outdated rule.
Right. And that short circuit gave us a heartbreaking farewell to an unformed child in a reed boat. From there, we witnessed the heavy metal celestial audit of Futomani, reading the explosive thermal cracks of a deer bone to diagnose the user error.
And the dumbfounded gods.
Yes, the blinking gods. But the true takeaway, the absolute mind-bender of this deep dive, is that the abandoned child refused to fade away. He washed ashore, transformed, and became Ebisu, the smiling god of fortune and prosperity.
It is a narrative that has resonated for over a millennium, and it leaves us with a final lingering thought for you to consider as we wrap up our time together.
Lay it on us.
Think about a major failure or setback in your own life right now. Maybe it was a project that crashed and burned, a path that suddenly evaporated, or an expectation you just couldn't meet.
We've all been there.
In the moment, it feels terrible. It feels exactly like standing on a twilight beach, casting a reed boat out into the dark water, watching your hopes drift out of sight. But what if that failure isn't the end of the story? What if it isn't a monster you have to slay? What if that setback is just out there drifting right now, simply waiting to wash ashore somewhere else under a different set of eyes to become your greatest fortune?
That is a brilliant thought to hold on to. We are so quick to judge our moments of collapse as total losses, but maybe they are just Ebisu in the making.
Exactly.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive today. Keep an eye out for those reed boats in your own life. Trust the currents, and we will catch you on the next one. Stay curious.